In biblical times, people walked in sandals or they just went barefoot. So, as you can probably imagine, roads were simple dirt paths for the most part. In cities and towns, there were constant animal droppings along these roads, and in addition to that, when people cleaned out their houses, they just swept everything, all of the rubbish, out into the street. So, travel by foot in the New Testament, it was a pretty dicey experience. And by the time you finished walking anywhere, your feet were, quite frankly, pretty disgusting because they were unprotected. Unprotected from all that animal waste and rubbish and dirt and dust and mud that you'd been walking through all day long. So when you entered a house, it was customary to have your feet washed. And this task was usually relegated to one of the servants because it was a pretty distasteful chore. In your mind's eye, now can you see it? Can you see Jesus and the disciples? They've walked into Jerusalem from the village of Bethany, about 3 miles away, where they've been staying this past week since all of the uproar and the excitement of Palm Sunday. And now they've come back into the capital again tonight to celebrate Passover in this borrowed room, which was probably rented out to them along with hundreds of other rooms for thousands of other pilgrims who would come to the capital city for this important pilgrimage holiday. That's sort of the way it was done. Can you see it? Okay, now somewhere near the door of that upper room, there would have been a large water jar, a basin, and some towels, so that all of their feet could be washed before the meal began. Any one of the disciples could have volunteered, but none did. Any one of the disciples could have reached for that water, but none of them did. So it's Jesus who eventually kneels before them. And one by one, he unlaces their sandals, he gently lifts up each foot, places it in the basin, covers it with that cool, clear, cleansing water, lifts it out again, and then carefully dries it. If we stop to think about it, this is truly a shocking scene. Can you see it? 12 disciples, 2 feet each. 24 times he does this. Yeah, even for Judas, who will betray him, even for Peter, who will deny him, even for the other 10, all of whom will use those feet to run away from him. Because just within a few hours, they're all going to be in the Garden of Gethsemane. And rough men with rough hands will roughly arrest Jesus and start him on the path of mock trials and beatings and crucifixion. And by mid-afternoon on Friday, he will be dead. And by Friday night, all of these men will be burying their heads in shame. By Friday night, all of them will be looking down at their feet in disgust. And when they do, Jesus wants them to be able to remember how he knelt before them just a few hours earlier and how he washed those feet. See, it really is all about remembrance. Can you see it? John's gospel is the only one of the 4 out of the 4 who records the washing of feet. The other 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they highlight the communion table on Maundy, Thursday, with the breaking of the bread and the sharing of the cup in what we have come to know as the communion passage. A man tells of once attending a communion service that was considerably different because it was all led by clowns. Every character was completely dressed in these bright clown outfits, and everything was done in pantomime. Complete silence. No words were spoken throughout the whole sacrament. It was distinctly different from anything this man had ever experienced before. And the key moment happened when a beautifully wrapped box was brought in by a couple of the clowns, and the box was presented to the head clown. And there were these big bright letters on the side of the box that said, "From God." The clown opened the gift from God, and he took out a long loaf of bread. He unwrapped it and examined it, cradled it in his arms like a baby, And then with the bread held that way in the crook of his elbows, he walked it up and down the aisles of the church like it was a child. Can you see it? The congregation began to imagine that baby growing as the clown walked up and down. First an infant, then a toddler, then a youth, finally as a young man. At the clown's direction, the congregation applauded the presence of this gift among them, this gift that had been labeled from God. And then the clown walked up the communion table, took out a long railroad spike and jammed it through the middle of the bread, and nailed it to a wooden cross right there on the table. And there hung the bread from God. The clown fell to his knees and cried. Then he reached up and he broke off half of that loaf from the cross, and he served communion to everyone in the church. And they all ate and drank together in silence. Can you see it? Can you see it? It's the transition from Maundy, Thursday to Good Friday, acted out in these very stark and vivid symbols. The water, the feet, the loaf, the bread, the cup, and the cross. It really is all about remembrance. Way back in the early history of primitive humanity, people made sacrifices to many different gods, and in that way they thought they could increase their crops or assure fertility or somehow deal with death. But these gods were a bunch of petty little tyrants. These gods demanded that the people who served him sacrifice their very best and their very dearest and their most beloved. They were gods who were very frivolous about who they blessed and who they cursed. And in every case, these were gods who demanded total obedience and complete subservience. The Christian faith cast all of that aside as so much nonsense, which it was. The Christian faith set religion on its head. The Christian faith turned religion upside down. For in Christianity, it's not people who come bowing and scraping to God. In Christianity, it's not people who approach God with downcast eyes and abject humiliation and total subservience. No. No, you see, in Christianity, it is God who comes humbly to humankind through Jesus. In Christianity, it is God who washes humanity's feet through Jesus. Prior to Christ, people offered sacrifices to their gods, but in Christianity, it's God who offers himself as a sacrifice to people. And so we have Good Friday. Can you see it? Can you see it? And yes, most of us have heard this all of our lives, but do we finally really see what is being said here? The concept is absolutely staggering. The next time you hear somebody say that all religions, they're basically the same, there ought to be something inside you that screams out, no, 1,000 times no, we're different. We are radically different. So different that there is not now, nor has there ever been, a faith that has connected any deity with humanity in the same way that we do. Here is Jesus Christ, whom the world so long awaited, the Son of the God who created the entire universe with powers that we can't even begin to imagine. And here is that Son of God kneeling there, washing the dirt off the feet of his followers. Here is Jesus Christ, who the world so sorely needed, and he's pinned to a cross with huge spikes breaking his body and shedding his blood for us. Can you see it? It's not us bringing our sacrifices for God. It's God bringing the sacrifice for us. See it? Know it? Remember it. Through the water and the washing, through the bread and the cup and the cross, we're acknowledging a faith that literally has turned all of religion upside down. Let's keep these thoughts in our hearts and our minds as you and I walk the path of Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday until together we arrive on Easter Sunday morning. Amen.